Hey there, Ahar here, and today we're going to be taking a look at another 0.1.5 change to Guardian Druid. So straight off the bat, we have Lunar Beam. It is no longer going to increase your max health by 15%, but rather it will scale based off your mastery. I'm not too sure whether this is going to be a talent I'll be playing still, even with this change. However, it's good that Lunar Beam is, getting a lot of attention. It is a capstone talent, so rightfully so, adjust it so that it feels like it's a choice that can be taken. Moonless Night, kind of the same thing. It's right above Lunar Beam. Wasn't necessarily strong enough to really take previously, so they're increasing the damage up to 20%, so 2x. Once again, I'm not too sure I'll be taking this. All of the things I'm going to be looking at are from an M plus perspective. This is more of a single target node, so I'm not going to get too into that. Might be something you might want to take in raid, especially this tier, since there's a lot of single target bosses. Now, on to the interesting stuff. There have been talent position changes for a lot of the important nodes. So, Galactic Guardian, Pulverize, Rendon Terror, Thorns, Untamed Savagery. And we're going to go straight into it and take a look. Oh, I forgot to mention Moonless Night. This is not actually right above Lunar Beam anymore. My fault on that. So immediately off the bat, from the previous 0.1.5 video I made, Galactic Guardian was right here where Thorns was. They have now placed Galactic Guardian right below Twin Moonfire, and I do think this makes a lot more sense, just positionally on the tree. It is now where the Moonfire talents are. Galactic Guardian works extremely well in combination with Twin Moonfire. I think running one without the other makes it a lot weaker. From what I was doing last year, running one without the other, I lost probably about 7 to 8k DPS, and this is not including the GCD's lost pressing Moonfire so that I can maintain Moonfire on all targets. And again, this is strictly an M+. Next up, we have, again, Moonless Night is now where Thorns was. Thorns has been moved up to here. I think this does make sense a little bit more where Thorns is. It's next to the Iron Fur talents, so it makes a little bit more sense. Next up, we have the big one: Pulverize, Ursoc's Fury, Rendon Terror / Untamed Savagery. So this was a very significant change, and I'll show you guys in a bit why. But Pulverize being a capstone, I think this is a fine way to go about it. I hope they up the damage of Pulverize a bit more so that it actually feels like at least a nice single target talent to take for such a heavy cooldown, and it's also a defensive, obviously. But as of right now, the only reason you ever take Pulverize is for the defensive, and that's fine as a capstone, but I wish it would do a bit more single target so that it felt a little bit more valuable as a capstone. That being said, it's fine because we have now Ursoc's Fury and Rendon Terror that you can take. But in addition to this, you can take this along with the Raise, Ursoc's Guidance, and Rage of the Sleeper with all the Moonfire things still. So let me show you the tree that I was messing around with. And this is not going to be a set in stone tree. This is just something I've been messing around with, trying to see what I can and can't take. So as you can see here, you're able to take Ursoc's Fury, Rendon Terror. You can take Raise. You can take Ursoc's Guidance, Rage of the Sleeper, Galactic Guardian, and Twin Moonfire. So this was something for me as an M+ Guardian Druid that I really wanted. I wanted to have all of it and they have pretty much given that to me. This makes Guardian Druid in a much stronger position because you have the raise with Tooth and Claw. That's added defensive, and then on top of that, raise no longer replaces Maul in the 0.5 patch, and this was in my previous video. So raise, you can take it on Tyrant Weeks, no worries, and it will still be fine. You still have Rage of the Sleeper. You can keep that extra defensive that you've been using pretty much throughout the entire of last tier. Guardian Druids felt very weak against frequent heavy magic tank busters, and Rage of the Sleeper was one of the ways to live dungeons like Jade Temple, Azure Vault, Ice Cutters, Haunting Gaze, Dark Claws, those abilities. Pulverize doesn't do the trick since it's obviously single target, but Rage of the Sleeper certainly helps with that. Raise will also help with that, and on top of all of that now, you also have Ursoc's Fury. So this is a very nice added defensive bonus to Guardian Druid. Now, as for Scintillating Moonlight, I guess the kind of comparison is taking Scintillating Moonlight or taking Rend and Tear. In my opinion, Rend and Tear is just a no-brainer to me because Scintillating Moonlight is a 2-pointer node. So realistically, you're kind of comparing Scintillating Moonlight to Rend and Tear plus Ursoc's Fury. So Rend and Tear, just defensively speaking, is 6%. Scintillating Moonlight, if you take 2 points, it's 10%. So essentially, Ursoc's Fury needs to be worth 4%. And I do think Ursoc's Fury is probably worth 4% if you do pull, I guess, big enough. But it's not like you need to pull 4 packs or something for Ursoc's Fury to be worth 4%. Double pulls should be absolutely fine for Ursoc's Fury to feel like it is 4% DR. Now, the added bonus on top of that is Rend and Tear also increases your damage by 6%. A lot of people have asked about Untamed Savagery. Why would you not take this? It's more damage, things like that. I do not actually think Untamed Savagery will be more damage in M+ scenario. As it currently stands, Moonfire will be your highest single target or your highest overall damage, followed most likely by Raise / Thorns of Iron. And then after that, you'll probably have Mangle and then Thrash. So Thrash, it isn't even our second or third highest damage. So for that reason, Rend and Tear most likely will be higher overall damage as compared to the 25% increased damage from Thrash. That plus, obviously, it's a defensive. So even if it were a little less damage, absolutely fine. You want the 6% DR on all mobs. Now, for the middle of the tree, this is where it gets a little tricky because you really want to have Thorns of Iron, but because you're taking, well, let me show you guys what the previous build is first. So this was kind of like the previous build where you have, or at least in the middle of the tree, you have Soul of the Forest, you got your Tooth and Claw, you have your Reinforced Fur, and After the Wildfire. Obviously, the position of these talents were different, but this is what you had. Now, because you pretty much, I don't want to say mandatory, but because you really want Thorns, it is a very high damage for 1 point. Very, very high. So in my opinion, it is going to be mandatory for M+. You need to take it out of either, the Tooth and Claw side, the Reinforced Fur side, or After the Wildfire. I do think Soul of the Forest is mandatory. It is a lot of rage generation. Rage generation, again, means shorter Incarn, more Iron Furs, which results in more healing from After the Wildfire and just obviously tankiness, as well as damage from Thorns of Iron. So I mentioned After the Wildfire. After the wildfire healing, in my opinion, is healing that will save your group as well as yourself. It is very spiky, so whenever you take big hits, you can heal that back up with after the wildfire procs. Same thing goes for Tyrant bosses. Your team is getting hit by some heavy AoE ability. You can save an after the wildfire proc to pretty much heal them up 25 to 50% depending on whether it crits. So after the wildfire, I think is going to probably be mandatory. I don't think you will ever change this talent, especially because survival of the fittest is also very, very important for Guardian Druids. Having Barkskin on a 32-second cooldown as compared to 45 seconds is quite a big difference, considering you need to survive outside of Incarn. So as of right now, you're quite squishy outside of Incarn. With the 0.1.5 patch, Ursoc's Fury will definitely help with that a bit. But again, Barkskin being on that 32-second cooldown will help significantly outside of Incarn. As for Tooth and Claw, I once again do not think this will be replaceable because now you're taking Raise plus Tooth and Claw, big damage, applies 15% DR across all mobs. That is probably as good as it gets defensively speaking, so don't think you can replace this. Now it comes down to Reinforced Fur, and you have the option of possibly taking out Persistence. I've considered this quite heavily. Inside of Incarn, you are unkillable, and the reason why you are unkillable is because you can press Frenzied Regions infinitely. Now, against frequent magic tank busters, you can heal it up every single strike, and so you can save your defensives until after Incarn. That way, you'll be able to survive for about, I would say, 45 seconds or so. 45 to 50 seconds before you really need to kite and get out of the way. And that's a big difference, right? If you didn't have those infinite regens, even though you're inside of Incarn, you'll probably have to kite, I don't know, after 30 seconds. So you have about 20 seconds to 30 seconds more uptime. And that is definitely significant. That's not nothing. 20 to 30 seconds is quite a bit of damage uptime, especially since Guardian Druid does so much damage. So I think depending on the dungeon, you do have the option of taking this out in order to continue running Reinforced Fur, which is still a defensive node, but it also increases your Thorns of Iron damage, so it's both. It's defensive and offensive. I personally think in most dungeons, I will probably be dropping Reinforced Fur and Layered Main, primarily because Layered Main isn't necessarily too strong. It does give you extra Iron Fur stacks, and it's great when you get that extra proc at the start of a pull, because on the start of the pull is when Guardian Druid is weakest. You have 0 to 1 stacks of Iron Fur. Mobs will melee you very heavily. So for that reason, I will most likely be taking these points out of here, and then I'll put one in Thorns of Iron. The other 2 points I most likely will put into Vicious Cycle and Fury of Nature for more damage, and that makes up for the Reinforced Fur damage that you lose. Alternatively, what you could possibly do as well is if you want a more defensive option, you could take a look into Ursoc's Endurance, which does add a little bit of damage to Thorns of Iron, but not nearly as much as 10.0, because in the 0.07 patch, Thorns of Iron is now, or it now does reduce damage beyond 4 stacks of Iron Fur. And so Ursoc's Endurance helped pretty much maintain 4 stacks of Iron Fur for a longer, duration. Since Iron Fur is on a 0.5 second cooldown, this increases Iron Fur by 2 seconds, so it essentially gives you 4 additional stacks of Iron Fur in big pulls. It prolongs, those 4 stacks. The other options you can do is double SI. I don't think you will necessarily take this unless you have it planned for specific pulls. What I mean by that is Jade Temple specifically. The very last pull before the last boss, you had 4 Dark Claw / Haunting Gaze mobs, and that is where I would use double SI to have more uptime. It gave me about 10 to 15 seconds more uptime because I could use one SI to take care of a whole set of 4 hits, Dark Claws and Haunting Gazes. So SI, very strong in that regard. Some other options, you can still take Bristling Fur, gives you a faster Incarn recovery, as well as, again, more Iron Fur whenever you need it. The more damage you take, the more rage you generate, which is great. I don't think I would ever put those additional points into Reinvigoration, primarily because I don't feel like I need additional Frenzied Regens. I think I'm good where it is currently. And then on top of that, obviously, you have Innate Resolve. The change Innate Resolve where you will heal more, up to 150% based on your missing health. So they buffed this, and in addition to that, you also have Dream of Cenarius. Dream of Cenarius with Protect of the Pack, as I had mentioned previously. This can heal you for probably about 50% of your health if it crits. Very strong. So I do not think we will need additional healing. What we probably need is ways to survive one-shots defensively, if that's what you're looking for defensively. Not necessarily one-shots, but like just high intake of damage. And you take high intakes of damage, whether it's a Magic Tank Buster or at the start of pulls when you have 0 to 1 stacks of Iron Fur. Those two are the most common scenarios. So Earth Warding could help with that, but unfortunately you don't have 3 points for it. SI will help with it a bit. Ursoc's Endurance is more of a passive thing. I don't think this will help as much. Bristling Fur will help with that. You can pre-pop Bristling Fur going into a pull. That will allow you to gain enough rage to press Iron Fur immediately. Sometimes if you go into the start of the pull, you tag it with Moonfire. Moonfire doesn't generate enough rage unless you have a Galactic Guardian proc. You always have to Mangle first, but Mangle requires you to be in melee, so it's a little tricky because you have to choose between using a Mangle or a Thrash. Thrash is to gain aggro. Mangle is to generate enough rage to press the Iron Fur. If you Thrash and there aren't enough mobs, you won't have enough rage for the Iron Fur, and so you might risk dying. If you press Mangle, your teammates might pull aggro, they might risk dying. So I've always had that kind of trade-off, which is why I always recommend popping a defensive going into a pull. And so Barkskin, shorter cooldown, that's why I think Survival of the Fittest is also very strong. Same thing for Rage of the Sleeper. Those are defensives you can pop going into a pull, which allows you to press Thrash first before getting that first stack of Iron Fur. Okay, I think I've pretty much gone over those points, or gone over where I would put those extra points that I'm taking out of Layered Mane and Reinforced Fur. Again, these are not set in stone. There might be some additional choices I might make, different choices I'll take depending on dungeons, things like that. Now, for the most part, this tree has been great. Fantastic changes. I think from a Men Plus perspective, you can't ask for any better for the most part. Are there some things that you might want to see changed a bit more? Probably, but you got pretty much every major thing you wanted. I don't think they will give Guardian Druids magic DR. I think they're pretty set on that, considering it's been a couple of changes now. They've had plenty of time to kind of think it over. It seems like that is not the path they want to take. The path they want to take is to give Guardian Druids high enough HP and high enough healing to survive those magic tank busters and be able to heal it back up. So it's a little bit like the DK route, but you don't have the constant death strikes. However, you do have, again, Incarn, a very big cooldown where you pretty much cannot die. So I know a lot of people have always said about these 2-pointer nodes. If these were 1-pointer nodes, you could take a lot more things, specifically Earth Warden. I think I'm okay with this. You can't have Guardian Druids. You can't give Guardian Druids everything. If you gave them everything, obviously, they would be just S tier. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to point out was Scintillating Moonlight and Flashing Claws. As it currently stands, from purely an M plus perspective, I think these are dead nodes. These are still 2-pointer nodes, and I don't think you will ever put points to take these because they are just not strong enough. There are too many strong talents at the bottom of the tree that Guardian Druid can take to where I don't think you will ever consider taking Flashing Claws or Scintillating Moonlight now. Ursoc's Fury, Rend and Tear, very strong. Raise, Blood Frenzy, very strong. Ursoc's Guidance, Incarn, very strong. Rage's Sleeper, this is one thing that you could possibly take out. I view this as more of a defensive talent, so this is something you can take out. Galactic Guardian, Twin Moonfire, too strong. So I just don't see a way I would ever take Scintillating Moonlight or Flashing Claws. Specifically Flashing Claws. This one I just don't know. Because they nerfed Berserk Ravage, you can't thrash 100% of the time. Or you can't thrash every GCD inside of Incarn. Flashing Claws has become a lot weaker, and so I don't see myself ever taking this node unless I'm doing some very, very low dungeons to where I don't need Rend and Tear or Ursoc's Fury, and then I would run Flashing Claws for more damage. As for Scintillating Moonlight, maybe from a raid perspective you could take this, because Ursoc's Fury is not nearly as strong in raid, since those are single target bosses. Ursoc's Fury won't give you nearly as much of a shield. Rend and Tear you can maybe still take. I honestly do not rate as Guardian Druid, but I can only speculate. If you wanted a bit more passive DR, you can get it from Rend and Tear, 1 point in Scintillating Moonlight. That's quite a bit, right? That's 6%, 11%, and then if you could get another point, it'd be 16%. I think that's okay. That's decent for Guardian Druid. You can maybe take out Raise since it's not single target. You could put it in here, but obviously this is a purely defensive talent. That means you're not taking single target nodes like Elun's Favored into Moonless Night. Alright, that pretty much wraps it up. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a little longer than I would have liked, but for the most part, great changes. I hope they keep coming out with more. And I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.